Messieurs, il est qui, quoi? When I started this journey, I didn't realize that it would take me down such a storied and wonderful history of the island of Saint Lucia, and also be able to help me understand things that I kind of had an idea but wasn't really sure. Because growing up, my grandmother only spoke Creole, or both of my grandmothers. I would say probably we were the first generation who were formally educated in English, and so many of us were forbidden to speak Creole. But the Creole culture around us was ubiquitous. It was all around us, in the words, in the food, in the way that people acted, and so it was hard to escape. But I always knew that there was something beautiful about that Creole culture, and it was deep and storied, and there were things that needed to be understood, that was so amazing, that even from where I went up onto the farms, what I saw, what I heard around me, and the foods that I ate, I always wanted to understand it even better. So I finally got the book by Devaux. It is They Called Us Brigands, the Saga of the Saint Lucia's Freedom Fighters. One of the first videos that I made was about brigands, and so I started off with the idea of looking at the word brigand in Creole, and then I broke that down and looked at it. I also put in the idea that the Kalinagos were part of the influence of brigands, not only Republicans. So while that may not be conclusive in the book, because nothing about the natives were in the book, natives fighting on the sides of the brigands in Saint Lucia, but Saint Vincent had natives, and I still believe that throughout the history of Saint Lucia, that there were Kalinago or Caribs who would mix with runaway slaves, or who were possibly living in the interior of the islands, or were part of the network using their canoes and supporting, because there were guns and ammunition being brought from Martinique and from other islands. And I suspect that they were even like Cacique, from one of the leaders from Saint Vincent, who was a native, was involved in part of that. And they had been, you know, so much wrong had been done to them. It's easy to understand that they were part of the revolutionaries all the way to the end, some of them having mixed with the runaways, enslaved people and free Negroes, and they were mulattoes, so it was a mixture of people. So one of the first things I did was brigands, right? So I'm not going to give a book review on the book, but I am going to run through a few things that I find rather interesting, or found rather interesting. And while I'm going on this journey, I'm definitely going to use this book as a resource, because it's amazing. Thumbs up to Mr. Robert J. Devaux for writing this book. I think it should be essential reading for students of Saint Lucia, or anybody who's interested in Saint Lucian history or the wider Caribbean history. This is a very, very good resource book. I read it, it's amazing. I'm probably going to read it a few other times, and I'm probably going to dig into it for information when I want to confirm or get some more information on things that I suspect, or to tie things up. So few interesting things for this video. For example, it says here that during the American War of Independence, this influenced a lot of runaway slaves in Saint Lucia. So maroonage, the first set of maroonage from 1776, to show you how the American Revolution affected the island of Saint Lucia, because there was a lack of food coming down to the islands to feed the enslaved people. A lot of them escaped, and it's said that the population dwindled significantly from 1776 to a few years after. So that's when a lot of the slaves started running away, moving into the interior and feeding off of the wild yams. I made another video on banja or bangao. This is a wild yam which used to be, or still grows, quite profusely into the mountains and the interior of the island of Saint Lucia. So while I was already digging into those Creole words and what it's telling me, I'm just confirming it from the book here as well. So 1776, marinage starts happening seriously because of the lack of food coming in. He also, something else that I found very interesting, I know growing up in Saint Lucia, they said that one of the first Catholic churches was in the community of Pralin, which is in Micoud, right? And apparently, I found out from my mom that my grandmother, great grandmother on my father's side used to live in the location that the old Catholic church was. And then I found out that there was an Abbé Boussière, one of the few priests who were in Saint Lucia during that time of the revolution, 1773, around that area, who joined the brigands, the army in the woods, Armée dans le Bois. I found that quite interesting. Also, we move on to find out another interesting tidbit that about Victor Hughes. I made another video talking about Orleans and Choiseul, and the idea that Victor Hughes actually came down to the Eastern Caribbean and brought a guillotine, and quite a lot of people lost their heads, mimicking what happened in Paris. So that I found quite interesting. He confirmed this idea about the French Revolution being brought down into the island of Saint Lucia by Victor Hughes, who they declared that they declared in a convention on the 4th of February 1794 the abolition of slavery in the French Antilles, and proclaimed in that decree by the National Convention in Paris. And that's even when more marinage started happening, because the slaves heard about what the French were doing in the French Revolution and yearned for their freedoms. That I found rather interesting as well. It also talked about the lifestyles of the brigands and talked about the food. I spoke about agouman, apart from banja, which is amaranth or a herb grown, kalalou. All those things were confirmed in this book as some of the foods that the runaways used to eat. I also made another video about, for example, what was going on in the Caribbean based on palm oils being used, chien bois, for example, which is a locket that a lot of the runaway slaves used to use, made out of wood for good luck or good luck charm. I made a video on that one called Chien Bois. Check it out. And the final video that I made recently was about jars containing treasure. I called it, from what I heard growing up, that it was a, for example, a jet d'argent, but in this book he called it a jet d'or, or a pot of gold. He also mentioned that a lot of the escaped planters and plantation owners hid their wealth in the hopes of coming back, but many of them never returned. So hence that contributed to the idea of finding hidden treasure. Also, he mentioned that there were a lot of bunkers all around Saint Lucia. When he started his journey, they knew about maybe less than 50, but when he ended, there were about 100 of those bunkers, hideaway places in the interior of Saint Lucia and all around the island. I must say that I am familiar with at least 2 of them that was not in the book. Apart from Wayon, which we have a farm in, I know about a place there where there's breadfruit trees and an oven. I was in the side of the cliff, and I had a great-great-grand uncle who used to live up all the way in the hills, and I'm talking about when roads were barely up there, and that is far up into the forest. So I have an idea that he may have been associated with this marinage and living up in the mountains. I did something on Neg Marron, which is runaway black people, And so this book confirms it as well. So many things to look into that I enjoy getting this book and reading it. It's confirmed many things that I already thought about. So I'm looking forward to bring you lots more little tidbits. Final thing I will say on is that I grew up in Micoud, and Micoud is associated with the Baron de Micoud, who married a Devaux to legitimize his governorship in Saint Lucia. And Micoud is in Praslin, and Micoud is where Monrepo is located. So Idi Kui Kwa, look forward to bringing you lots of other details, and look forward to seeing you on the next one.